2, 1. Shabbat Shalom. In this video, we're going to discuss Phase 2 of Yirei Yah, translated in English as the fear of the Lord, but I've avoided using that term because the true essence of Yirei Yah is very far away from the English understanding, especially the word fear. So in Phase 2, we're going to use a very scripturally based definition. A definition of Yirei Yah that is basically founded in Scripture. It is almost formulaic to some degree. And so we're just going to dig into the Scriptures right away. Beginning in Proverbs chapter 2, and all the verses I'm using today, they're all from the Septuagint, just to set that matter straight, or get that out of the way. Proverbs 2, verses 5, and then verses 1 and 2. So we're going to work backwards in the first scripture. So verse 5 kind of summarizes, or it's leading up to a point, and this is the conclusion of 1 and 2, which we will read after, again working backwards. It says here, Proverbs 2, verse 5, "Then shalt thou understand Yirei Yah." So I'm going to replace the fear of the Lord with Yirei Yah. "Then shalt thou understand Yirei Yah, and find the knowledge of Elohim," or God. So how are they led to understand the fear of the Lord, or Yirei Yah? Let's read verses 1 and 2. What was the lead up to verse 5? Verse 1 and 2. Son, if thou wilt receive the utterance of my commandment, and hide it with thee. So this is the son of, I suppose, Solomon, and he is saying, receive my commandment, and these are commandments of God, not Solomon's commandments, and hide it, not hide it as in not do it, but guard it. Thine ear shall hearken to wisdom. Thou shalt also apply thine heart to understanding, and shalt apply it to the instruction of thy son. So we're supposed to pass it down to his progeny as well. But essentially, so what is the Yirei Yah in this verse anyway? It is the commandment, or commandments of God, wisdom, listening to wisdom, and understanding, and then passing it down. But so let's look at the next scripture. So that gives us a sneak preview, or a glimpse, an appetizer of what's to come. Understanding Yirei Yah is to receive the instructions of God, to understand with your heart, and to be able to apply wisdom and discernment. So that's what I got just from that, Proverbs chapter 2. That's a lot. But in Proverbs 15, it gives us another definition, not completely different, but it also agrees with Proverbs 2. So Proverbs 15, verse 33 reads like this: Yirei Yah is, or equals, if this was a mathematical equation, it would be Yirei Yah equals, what is the formula? Instruction plus wisdom plus the highest honor will correspond therewith. So let me read it in the English, not the math version. Yirei Yah is instruction and wisdom. Okay, so that matches up with the previous verse we looked at. And the highest honor will correspond therewith. And I think that to make sense of that, it means those who are of the highest honor or esteem will behave accordingly to these instruction and wisdom. So they're not going to deviate from what was mentioned. Okay, so it says right there that Yirei Yah is, number one, instruction. And what is instruction? Teaching. So who's teaching, or teachings? Well, God's, frankly. What books are known as the teaching of God? The 5 books of the law, of Moses. They're meant to be an instruction to the kings of Israel, and by extension all of Israel, and they're supposed to also make a copy for themselves. So not only are the instructions for the kings of Israel and all of Israel, the natives, native born of Israel, I should say, not like aboriginals, and those who are the strangers amongst Israel, who are the Gentiles who wish to cleave to their Elohim. In modern times, we would say this is the instruction, the Torah, as it is said in Hebrew, would apply to physical Israel and spiritual Israel. Number 2, it says that Yireh Yah is wisdom, which seems to mean that the instructions that I just mentioned, the Torah, the law of Moses, or really God's law, are the foundation. They are the foundational constitutional document. So how to apply, so the wisdom mentioned here anyway, in this verse, is knowing how to properly implement or carry out those instructions. Okay? So actually, I'm going to do a little bit of proofreading on the fly. I'm going to say that I'm going to move this little part here. Sorry to do this on the fly, but I want to perfect this. So I'm going to keep presenting this. I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay. Yeah, it just doesn't make too much sense if I mention it that way. Okay. So in any case, just to make it more perfect. Okay. So I personally believe you cannot have Yireh Yah without the Torah, and you also cannot keep the Torah in a way that is truly pleasing to Yah, with integrity and purity of heart, without having the wisdom that comes from above, from Him, from the Father. So next is Proverbs 8, verse 13. And it also has a formula as well. I'm just going to read it the way it is written. The Yireh Yah hates unrighteousness and insolence and pride and the ways of wicked men. So that is an explicit definition of Yireh Yah from Yah's own mouth, from His own Spirit, speaking through, in this case, Solomon, King Solomon. So the concept of Yireh Yah is explicitly defined and even further detailed for us in this Proverbs 8. So there are now 4 additional attributes. They are hating unrighteousness, insolence, pride, and the ways of wicked men. So the next natural thing to think on or to ask is, what is the opposite of these 4? And I ask this question because this verse is basically defining what Yireh Yah is not, what it is not. Therefore, the opposite of them naturally will give us an idea of what Yireh Yah is, or at least an idea of what it is, perhaps. So number 1, hating unrighteousness, the opposite would be loving righteousness. These are easy. Anyone could do this, even a 5-year-old. Number 2, what is the opposite of hating insolence? And insolence can be defined as hate. So what is the opposite of hating hate? Loving love. Another definition for insolence is also immodesty. So what's the opposite of that? Loving modesty. Okay, number 3, what is the opposite of hating pride? Loving humility or meekness, synonyms. Number 4, what is the opposite of hating the ways of wicked men, which I personally would define as lawlessness or even rebelliousness to God's commandments? Well, that would be loving the ways of righteous men. So obedience to the commandments of God. So just to recap so far, do all four of these opposites, do they agree with the character of God as outlined by the fruit of the Spirit? Let's look at them. Yes, they all do. They correspond with an individual fruit of the Spirit in a lot of cases. So loving righteousness could be goodness, the fruit of the Spirit of goodness, or in Hebrew, zedek, which literally means righteousness. So I've done a video on that about goodness, the fruit of the Spirit of goodness, and it's actually closer to zedek, or righteousness. Next, loving love, or modesty. So that's ahava, love, or for using the definition of modesty, loving moderation, or that's related to temperance and self-control. That's also, those are also two fruits of the Spirit. Next, loving meekness or humility. That's literally a fruit of the Spirit of meekness. Lastly, loving the ways of righteous men, obedience to the commandments of God. So this one is a bit tricky. It's best described, at least in my mind, as the holistic follower of God, looking at them holistically, not like in terms of medicine. I mean, just the holistic, all the elements of a follower of God. So their internal heart. So their internal heart is in obedience to God, and manifested by their external life. So their words, their actions as they live day to day, and their interactions, and whether it's the relationships they have with people around them, and also the relationship with their Creator as well. So that's how I would look at that. So we have defined Yirayah in a more tangible and simple outline based on using these scriptures. Again, scripturally based definition. So spiritually, I perceive that the four of these, hating unrighteousness and so on, what it boils down to, these four, and let's just read them again. So hating unrighteousness, hating immodesty, hating pride, hating the ways of wicked men. If we're going to kind of summarize them into one element, boil them down to one attribute, I would say that all four of them together can be combined into one and summarized by two words: hate evil. Since I believe that they all stem from sin and evil, so the opposite of doing that, of hating evil, is to love good. Love what is good. And the scriptures actually support what I am saying. I know it sounds a little far-fetched, right? That this is the next logical step after we hate evil or unrighteousness. And it is the following. It can be found in Psalm 45, verse 7. I'm going to read that for you. You have loved righteousness and hated iniquity. Look at how they just pair up so well there. And this relates to the first attribute of Yirayah, as we discussed in this video anyway, loving, or I should say hating, unrighteousness. And King David also backs up my theory. In Psalm 34, verse 11, he says, "Come, you children, hear me. I will teach you Yirayah. Keep your tongue from evil, and your lips from speaking guile. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it." So not just hating evil, not just not saying evil things or participating in evil activities. We can see there is a positive action to take as well, proactive approach. Psalm 97, verse 10. David writes, "You that love Yah, hate evil." It's simple enough. So the first thing, before we can do those things, the positive part of it, is to seek good. You need to take these first steps in order to seek good. Amos 5, verse 14 to 15. So what am I even saying here? I'm just thinking about what I'm reading from my script here. What does that mean? Before you can do those things, I think it's talking about seeking peace, pursuing it, and so on. We have to actually seek good. Seek good. Or maybe it's hate evil before we seek the good. But in any case, maybe I'm confusing myself. So let's read Amos 5. It says, "Seek good and not evil, that you may live." Reminds me of Deuteronomy. Choose life, right? "And so Yah Elohim Almighty shall be with you, as you have said." What did they say? "We have hated evil and loved good. And you restore judgment in the gates." So this is Adonai speaking to them. You restore judgment in the gates. "That Adonai Elohim Almighty may have mercy on the remnant of Joseph." So it doesn't use Yireh Yah in this verse. It actually uses hate evil, which is, by extension, just to be fair, it is one of the definitions of Yireh Yah based off of Proverbs 8, verse 13. But it also adds something positive to be done, not just refraining from doing something or hating evil. It actually says to love good. And since we know that nature abhors a vacuum, as the quote goes, something has to take its place when we remove evil. We must not only refrain from doing evil, but we must also do something. So it does read, "Seek good and not evil, that you may live. And so Yah Elohim Almighty shall be with you." You're going to notice I interchange with Yah and Adonai. "As you have said, we have hated evil and loved good." So that supports the seventh attribute that I introduced, that is to hate evil and love good. All these scriptures that I brought up. So let's do a quick checklist of everything we have collected so far, at least in this video, in our quest to define what is Yireh Yah using the scriptures. So number 1, it is instruction, meaning the teachings of God. Number 2, it is wisdom, knowing how to apply those teachings. Number 3, it is to hate unrighteousness and to love righteousness. Number 4, it is to hate insolence and to love modesty. Number 5, it is to hate pride and love humility. Number 6, it is to hate the ways of wicked men, but to love the ways of righteous men. And number 7, it is to hate evil and love good. So, in a nutshell, we can almost wrap up all these numbers 3 to 6 with hate evil, love good, because wisdom and instructions are separate. And to summarize what hating evil and loving good is, to love good is to love God, or to love Yah, the God of Israel. That is pretty much a starting definition of phase 2. Okay, so it definitely is not being scared or terrified, as we mentioned in the very first videos of what Yireh Yah is not. So I believe this concept of Yireh Yah is better understood as being closer to love rather than hate, being closer to love rather than fear as well. So I would encourage you all, whenever you read the words fear of the Lord, instead replace them with being in awe of God, replace them with hating evil and loving God. So I'm not trying to add to Scripture. What I am doing is I'm trying to add to the understanding of Scripture. So, having said all that, there's still more to explore on this topic. Yes, there's still more. We have, I believe, one last presentation on Uriah, maybe two, but I think there's at least one, and that would be either the third phase or the final phase. So I'm not sure if there's going to be 3 or 4, but we will see how that goes next time. That's a fortnight from now, which means 2 weeks in the Old English. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I bid you all Shabbat Shalom and Maranatha.